in any place or in any business where the road is high, the risk is there. But our own risk is mainly perceived, not real risk. That is the issue. And unfortunately for us, in Africa, we are not really very good at telling our own story.
Do embrace all the innovations which the world can allow you to. Learn from all the experiences which, from east to west, from north to south, you can choose at the best to meet your vision. But be uncompromising in remaining deeply Africans.
The most important thing is keep moving, keep working, keep growing. Don't ever stand still. Keep being inspired and keep wanting to do the things that excites you and that fulfills you.
There is no better way to learn than to go down a rabbit hole to look at what Africa's leaders, entrepreneurs, and game changers have said over the years. You know what? I just came from such a rabbit hole. I've been going through a couple of videos that I have stored over the years in my drive just to look at what Africa's entrepreneurs and game changers have said over the years. I've picked out about 20-something lessons that I'm going to share with you in this video. And I think this is something that you really want to sit down and listen to, because this one is packed with a lot of advice from entrepreneurs all over the continent. I'm talking of advice literally from Cape to Cairo and from Harare to Lagos. And so, without wasting a lot of time, let's jump right into it, starting with Patrice Motsepe of South Africa, who says, keep moving and keep dreaming.
When I was 5 years old, my parents were in business. So my father used to wake us up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we would get onto in a truck and go and buy fruits and vegetables from the market in Pretoria, in South Africa, Tshwane. So I've always been in business. And we'd close the family grocery store and the family businesses 12 o'clock at night. And I would also have to stand behind the counter. So standing behind the counter taught me what profitability is all about. You buy a loaf of bread for 10 cents, you've got to sell it for something more than 10 cents. You can't, of course, unless if you are the Motsepe Foundation, you can sell it for 6 cents or less. So I always had but of course I became a lawyer because my dream was also to be a lawyer. And when I became the first partner in one of the biggest first black partner at that time, I realized that my passion was actually in business. So the message is, where you are now, have dreams of what you want to do now. 10 years from now, you may have different dreams. And that's fine. But the most important thing is keep moving, keep working, keep growing. Don't ever stand still. Keep being inspired and keep wanting to do the things that excites you and that fulfills you.
As you keep moving, you should always remember lesson number 2 from Claire Akamanzi of Rwanda, who says, never accept the status quo.
Never accept the status quo. However much the odds are against you, you can always aim and achieve better. Never underestimate your potential to be among the best in the world. We refused the notion that Africa is dirty and disorganized. We reject the idea that Africa lacks the ability to rise and prosper on its own.
A part of not accepting the status quo, of course, is to push back on some narratives that have been peddled over the years. You know, narratives that say, well, Africa is for people who are starving, people who are poor, and people who never amount to anything. This advice, the third lesson, comes from Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote of Nigeria, who says, tell the African story.
You see, majority of foreign investors, because they don't really go into Africa, they don't really check what Africa is all about. They stay just by reading newspapers and co. And what they normally do is that, okay, fine, for example, today we are going to have an election in Nigeria sometime in November or so. They say, okay, fine, we want to wait and see the outcome of the election. After the election, if after we have finished the election successfully, everything goes well, then they want to see the stability of the government, and then that will take them 2 years. By 2 years, politicians will start talking about politics again. Then they have to wait. They fall back again and wait. So really, when you look at it, I think today what they need to look at is that, look, there is no government that will be against business. So you go ahead, you invest. The next government that will come in, even after finishing either 8 years or 10 years, they will also be, they are also going to be pro-business. So if they are going to be pro-business, it means that you are not going to really make a mistake by investing. Once you start, you have to continue. And then you look at it, obviously, yes, in any place or in any business where the road is high, the risk is there. But our own risk is mainly perceived, not real risk. That is the issue. And unfortunately for us, in Africa, we are not really very good at telling our own story. But I think things are changing. People are beginning to understand that, look, things are going very, very well.
It goes without saying that if you really want to be able to tell the African story, you have to make sure that you yourself, you remain deeply and truly African. And this is the lesson that we get from Graça Machel of South Africa, or Mozambique, if you really want to say it, who says, remain truly and deeply African.
Do embrace all the innovations which the world can allow you to. Learn from all the experiences which, from east to west, from north to south, you can choose at the best to meet your vision. But be uncompromising in remaining deeply Africans. Africans. And I see then this initiative precisely by young Africans, for Africans, as the renewal of the dream of freedom, which the forefathers of this continent, when they had that long vision to say, one day all of us will be free. Now this generation is said, freedom today has another meaning. The meaning is, how do we grasp the best of knowledge, of science, of technology, to take the aspirations of millions of Africans to materialize in a way we rescue and we reclaim our own origin of being Africans, but we catch up, as Fred was saying, with the 21st century.
Of course, remaining African obviously means you need to be focused and dedicated. You need to be focused and dedicated on your work. And this is a lesson that is reiterated by Aliko Dangote of Nigeria, who says, be focused and be dedicated.
Well, the problem with some of our younger generation today, they just want to jump and see themselves up there, overnight. It doesn't really happen. What you need to do is to be very, very focused as a person and be dedicated to whatever that you are doing. It is not really good for you to now go and try something, then after a month you just say, no, it doesn't work. You jump into something else. I think you need to be very, very focused in what you are doing. Once you believe in what you are doing, you see, you should not take your either business or job as something that you must do. Okay, you must take it as it's part of your hobby. If it's part of your hobby, then you do it better.
Focus and dedication obviously come in with the hours. And this is something you need to understand, that a lot of these guys who are really breaking barriers, who are really being change makers and trendsetters in Africa, they're putting in the hours. And this is something that comes from Naguib Sawiris of Egypt, who says, remember to put in the hours.
When I started my career at 22, 23, I started working from 7 o'clock in the morning till midnight. I did this for 3 years, no weekends. I have an hour nap in the afternoon, just to be honest. Yani. Then I used to go out and party till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Still like now, yeah. So it was not from 9 to 5 because I felt I'm young, there is a lot of opportunities, and if it's the time to kill myself and work to achieve my ambition, and my ambition was sky high. It was the only way to do it because, you know, one thing I learned when I went to school in Zurich, in the Polytechnic, was that being intelligent alone is not enough. You don't put the right hours, so people who actually stick to this 9 to 5 theories, they will not get too far. Yeah.
Putting in the hours and working hard is, of course, a universal language. You would suspect that a couple of these guys would have said it. I'm going to give you a small marathon here. You're going to hear from Aliko Dangote, you're going to hear from Precious Moloi Motsepe, and you're going to hear from Vera Songwe, who all say, work hard and it will pay off.
If you are going into any business, you must understand the business A to Z. You must know that business. You shouldn't just go and invest because somebody now will say, okay, hey, you know, there's good money in cement, then you go and jump into cement. You have to understand the business in and out. And that's the difference with me. I know my business in and out. You can wake me up any time and ask me about fertilizer, ask me about anything that we are doing. And the other one is really to work very hard, and you have to have the tenacity of continuing to, you know, you have some hiccups here and there, but you have to be focused in terms of what you are doing.
As you correctly said, we both grew up in the township of Soweto. That's the same township where Nelson Mandela, Bishop Tutu, who's also very well known, also grew up, including you know, the very famous Soweto uprising of 1976. At that time, I was a young girl, probably in middle school, you know, when these disruptions came. How did that inform and shape who I am today? I think from very early on, I realized, well, firstly, my parents were a big influence in my life. We grew up in a very God-fearing family. We went, Patrice will tell you the same, we went to Christian schools. We were in a Catholic church. We had very strong family faith values. And education for my parents was the one asset that they could give to us to help us get on with life. And I always tell my children, we have 3 sons, I always say to them, my dad believed so much in me, and that is the other big asset that he gave me. You know, he used to tell his siblings, this is my daughter, you ain't seen nothing yet. You know, he was so proud of me. And that instilled,
he was quite right.
Well, you know, that instilled a sense of self-confidence that nobody else, nobody in this world could tell me otherwise, because my dad had told me I was good enough. So Soweto for me was never an obstacle. I knew there were better things out there in life for me. I had to work hard to achieve them, and they supported me in my journey.
It is impossible to get to where we all are, because we are all collectively privileged already. We are at the University of Oxford, Said, the business school. You don't get there without hard work. But I think the first thing is just hard work. It's just plain hard work. You work hard. I almost wake up, you know, every morning feeling that you're the underdog, feeling that you've lost, and then you work hard to win. And that is sort of, and then at the end of the day, you've won. But then that success has to be very sort of short-lived, because again, it's the next morning, the sun will come up, and then you will have lost again, and then you have to start working. And that makes you work even harder. And I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is just the fortune that we all have to have friends, family, and science is a little bit of your question, around us that, you know, make sure that we have that support system, mentors, professors, and even good managers, sometimes bad managers, all help us. Those good experiences, those bad experiences, each one of them helps you to go to the next place and to go there stronger. I think I was just telling earlier today that, as you were talking to me, I was saying, you know, I am always scared when I go out. because you're always scared of that failure, and then you work like hell to make sure that you succeed. And it is that combination, I think, of extreme hard work and fear, at least in my case. And and he was saying to me every morning when he comes, I don't believe him, but he was saying every morning when he's doing his classes, he has the same. But it's that combination of fear and hard work that I think just makes you manage that one more difficulty, get that one more success, and continue to go forward.
For it to pay off, you obviously need to close the deals. You cannot just continue talking and talking and talking and making presentations that don't actually amount to closing deals. So make sure you take to heart this advice from the president of the African Development Bank, Akin Adesina, who says, let's talk and let's close the transactions.
I think Africa needs to take advantage not only of the resources that it has domestically, but it needs to actually market itself better and leverage global capital, for its own development. And so when you take a look at the amount of infrastructure gap that Africa has today in terms of financing, is anything between $78 billion to about $112 billion. Obviously, the governments can play a role, the bank can play a role, and private sector in Africa can play a role, but there's a pool of capital out there that is looking for where to invest. And so what we decided to do was to set up this that is called the Africa Investment Forum. And the focus of this forum is not just to be another forum where you go and talk. No, we're tired of talking. We just basically want to have nothing but transaction, transaction, transaction. So this particular Africa Investment Forum is 100% transactional. No speeches, no political speeches. We just want to connect global pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, institutional investors to Africa and leverage those investments to Africa. And what's going to be unique about it is that, people will say the capital is there, but always is issue of where are the bankable projects. And so a key part of this is developing the bankable projects for Africa. And second is, people always talk about risk. I don't think risk is a big issue. The issue is how you manage your risk and how the upside returns. And so what we're trying to do with this is we are setting up a very powerful co-guarantee platform that will de-risk the investments that land on Africa on this particular platform.
While it is good to close the transactions today, your true mark will really be seen when you are able to keep closing transactions and keep growing your businesses, your enterprise, your organization, or whatever you're running at this very moment in this very year. So for you to do that, you need to make sure that you actually have an ability to see what's going to come ahead, to look at the opportunities and to see how to seize them. And this advice comes from Tony Elumelu, who says, have foresight.
You need to be able to see beyond today, because it is in trying to see beyond today that you create a unique business opportunity, an advantage. And if you're able beyond seeing to now actualize it by working hard, then it makes it a lot easier again. So first message by way of inspiration is that as entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, we need to have the ability to see beyond today. We need to understand our environment and see what could be the future of the environment. Understanding that, being able to say this could happen, if you get it right, you would have created huge opportunities.
Even when you have foresight, you would need to understand that you never know everything. You always need to be open to other people's ideas. And this is something that comes from Mo Ibrahim, the Sudanese billionaire, who says, be open to listening to other people's ideas.
My leadership style, actually, I think is an inclusive approach. It starts from, I really don't know a lot of things. And that's not a problem. The problem, if you don't raise your hand and say, I don't know, then you'll always remain ignorant and you're likely to make a lot of decisions. And then I have seen in my career, a lot of my managers fail because of this arrogance. They are afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't know, when they don't know. But you need to include people, listen to everybody. But then once a decision made, you lead from the front. Then it's finished, it's done. Then you go ruthlessly and do it. But then you have your people behind you. And so we need this clarity. You give people a chance to really add their views and inputs, etc. Then you are in a better situation, better position to make a decision. And once you made a decision, everybody falls in behind because you're given a chance. That is a way really to really move forward. And I think that's useful. Openness and decisiveness.
The quality of the people you listen to obviously does matter. You cannot just be listening to everyone who you meet without really doing a due diligence on them, without making sure that they will actually add value to you, to your enterprise, and to your life. And so Akina Desina, the president of the African Development Bank, says, hire competent and diverse teams, and in that way, you'll be able to actually extract value from such diverse teams.
You know, if you go into an aircraft and you see a pilot, you don't go in and ask them whether they're from small country or from large country. You just want a very competent person flying that aircraft for you. And I have lived and worked more than 15 years, you know, in African countries, different African countries, almost all of them. Until 4 years ago when I came to Nigeria, I've always worked in small countries and in fragile states. So I understand those issues very, very well. In fact, you might even say my biggest bias is, as you can tell, is always towards small countries and fragile states because that's where my professional work had been done. You know, when I was in Liberia, in Guinea, in the Maro River area, on boats, actually doing research. I understand those challenges very well, and I want to make sure that those priorities get focused by the bank. You know, and the other thing that I would say, you know, is I'm somebody that's very big in competence, in getting competent people. In Nigeria today, my chief of staff, you know, who is a woman, is not from Nigeria. She's from Kenya. You know, and how many ministers do you find in a country that have a chief of staff from a different country? You know, I am big on inclusiveness. I am big on making sure that you have gender empowerment.
Ultimately, your leadership is always tested in the trying moments where obviously your teams can help you come up with a strategy, but you have to take a stand as the leader. This advice comes from Claire Akamanzi of Rwanda, who says, be willing to stand for what is right, even when you're facing a lot of pressure from powerful forces.
Stand for what is right and be willing to fight for it, even if it's not popular. 2 years ago, the East African community of several countries decided to discourage importation of used second-hand clothing in order to promote domestic textile production and also restore the dignity of our people so they could also wear new clothing. The United States recently retaliated with a tariff on exports of new clothing from Rwanda. Does that sound familiar, Canada? But it was the right thing to do, and we are standing by it. Dignity is not granted. You have to claim it. In Rwanda, we call this agaciro. Young Africans and their leaders today demand for equal representation globally and for a voice.
In business, as in life, there are always things that you need to know off the top of your head. There are trends that you need to recognize. There are numbers that should sound right or wrong to you in your head just because of the experience that you have over time. This advice comes from one of the men who I admire the most, Strive Masiyiwa of Zimbabwe, who says, know the importance of numbers and be able to grasp when the numbers are sounding off.
How many here follow soccer, know the rules of soccer? Most of you, right? So if I say I came in here and I said, you know, oh, I was watching football last night just before I went to bed, and Manchester City, don't like Manchester City.
Me too.
I'm only kidding. But so I said, okay, Manchester City were winning 9-1. You would say, was that soccer? The number. Or if I came in and I said, no, the score was 18-1. You'd say, no, that wasn't soccer. Okay? In other words, you have such an understanding of the game that you know the numbers. Yes, it can happen. You know, I remember when old Zaire was beaten 9-1 or something by Yugoslavia, but some of you weren't born. We ran away. But you know numbers. Business must be numbers. The entrepreneur must always function in numbers. Make numbers your best friend. Okay? And know when you see a number that this number doesn't make sense. 9 times out of 10, I read stuff in our newspapers where they're not numerate numbers. They're not grasping the significance of numbers, that you know, and no one shouts and screams to say, how can you say that?
Now, life is not really full of numbers, is it? There's some instances where we're actually required to use, some other parts of our brains that don't include numbers. And in those instances, there could be biases that come to us. When you listen to things, you might have a certain way of concluding things that are not really the way you're supposed to conclude them. Listen to this interesting story from Precious Moloi Motsepe and tell me in the comments below how many of you had the bias which she identifies in the end.
Now, I studied medicine. I grew up in Soweto, in the township of Tladi. I come from very humble beginnings. My father was a teacher, and my mother was a nurse, and there are 5 of us at home. And very often, we would be managing, and then something happens, and we fall below, what the family can afford. But I'd like to share with you, during my medical student days, a story that comes from back then. And listen carefully. So a father and son get in a car accident and are rushed to hospital. The father dies. And the boy is taken to the operating room. And the surgeon says, I can't operate on this boy because he's my son. How is this possible? Anybody? Is the father and the son involved in the car accident? Anybody at the back? There's a hand up there. Anybody else? Yes! I'm so excited because I asked my husband, Patrice, I asked my 3 boys, I asked 2 men who work with me, and I said, and they all said to me, it's not possible. I mean, unless it's maybe the father is part of the extended family and he's an uncle and he's also. And I'm like, hey, how about what you said? I'm so proud to be amongst people of such high intellect. You really get it, just like that. So the answer is simple. The surgeon is a mother. But because we never ever think of women in those positions, if I say pilot, you see John. If I say surgeon, you see a tall, very big guy, scalpel, you don't see the woman. The petite woman, you don't see her. It's actually 40 to 75% of people who can't solve this riddle because of unconscious bias, okay? We all have unconscious bias, and we pass it on to our children, and they don't see themselves in the positions that they should be.
Now that you have checked your own biases and promised to do a little better going forwards, do make sure as you're building your enterprises and organizations in Africa this year, or anywhere around for the world really, make sure you invest in women.
So I want the bank to do a lot more on girls' education, making sure that we can get ourselves girls into school, stay in school, achieve in school, and also make sure that the school environment it's one where they can be free without having to be having, a sexual harassment or any kind of molestation, so they can learn in peace and quiet. And that is very, very important. But also, we shouldn't be having early marriages because early marriages deprive economies. Thirdly, I really think when it comes to getting Africa going, believe me, it's the women that make it, bouge, as they say in French. Why do I say that? Most of the businesses you see in Africa today that are small and medium-sized enterprises are owned by women. We were doing two things. First is to create what is called an affirmative finance action for women. This is to leverage $3 billion of financing for women alone in Africa. I wish I could do so for men, but I think that women's situation is so compelling. 97% of the women that you give loans to, they pay it back. And so I think it's very important to continue to support them. So the African Development Bank is currently putting this together to leverage $3 billion of support just for women, women businesses and women entrepreneurs in Africa.
This advice specifically goes to all the women from Vera Songwe, who says, be persistent and be prepared as you have to break barriers.
Be persistent, work really hard, be extremely prepared, because, we always have to sort of earn the stage. We are never given the stage. And you can't earn it if you're not prepared. You can't earn it if you're not resilient. You may not get it the first time, but you have to keep trying. If you believe in the idea, then, you must continue with it. Because the minute you decide that you're going to stop believing in the idea, you've not only failed yourself, but you fail all the other women that are behind you. And believing and not succeeding the first time just requires you to become even stronger, even more sturdy, and to go back and work a little bit harder. I think there is proof. There is enough proof now that working sufficiently hard, harder than maybe the rest, but that should not be a cause for complaint. It should be a cause for saying, I can do this and I can get further. So really ensuring that you can work. But look around you, bring other people along with you as you do that, and then, be grateful for the support that you have from friends and family and mentors and managers and, good leaders that you have ahead of you.
Now, there's always a bias of people trying to look at success stories and try to replicate or follow them. But Tony Elumelu of Nigeria actually says, make sure you follow the principles and not the success stories themselves, for it is the principles that will carry you.
First, all of us don't have to be entrepreneurs. We need policymakers, because policymakers actually dictate and determine the survival ability of entrepreneurs. We need political leaders. In fact, just this week, I wrote a piece on African youth where I challenged them to get involved, also in governance, how we are governed, and telling them that they have a lot of power to influence and determine how we or they are governed, to tell them that my generation and the one before us, we can do better. And this younger generation should take it upon themselves to help develop Africa. So all of us don't have to be entrepreneurs. And when you're talking about the successes you hear of entrepreneurs, for every one entrepreneur that succeeds, you don't know the number of entrepreneurs that have failed. And for also every one entrepreneurial initiative that succeeds, you don't know how many others have failed. So for all of us, including me, it's never a linear journey. And that's what I spoke to them today about, that the journey to entrepreneurship is a long-term journey. It's not linear, it's not easy, but with resilience, with hard work, with discipline, with a culture of savings, prudence, and deferring consumption, moving consumption forward so that you can save and reinvest and make more money, you can succeed with those principles. So for me, when people say, share your success stories, I always say to them, it's not so much success story than the principles that led to the success. Those are the things we need to teach people. Because if you follow those principles, your own success story could come from a different way.
For those who are still looking for partners in life, Grasa Machel says, make sure you find partners who can give you space and who won't be threatened by you.
How did I manage to marry two presidents? Honestly, I didn't marry any president. No, not at all. There's a huge confusion there. I married two extraordinary human beings in different times in history. I married Samora Machel at the age of 30, okay? And I married Madiba was 53. So there was a huge difference between the two experiences in life. They were both, my English now, but they were both very different as human beings. But there was one fundamental quality which attracted me to them. They would respect me. It's just to respect me. And to accept me to accept me knowing that I'm not a perfect person. And that was also the condition for me to accept them. I knew they were not perfect people, and we just have to be able to accept one another and respect. It's absolutely fundamental. Now let me give you a response which Madiba one day, there was a journalist who tried to embarrass him. To say, Mr. President, how can you accept that your wife is Mozambican? She didn't change to become South African because she married you. So she is Mozambican, and even worse, she is Michelle. She keeps the name of her first husband. She doesn't take your name as Mandela. How can you live with this? And he made himself even more comfortable. I was there. And he said, you know, I'm so grateful to her because she allows me to continue to be Nelson Mandela, and she allows me to continue to be South African. You hear? And it was brilliant, and it killed it all. And that is when a human being is absolutely self-confident with himself, that he doesn't feel threatened to say, why my wife now is not taking my name, and why.
Above all, always remember, do not listen to the naysayers.
Every young person can achieve their dreams, can be what they want to be. The key is hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance. And what is also important is you will find people who will tell you, you want to start a new business, and they'll say to you, it will not succeed. Because there's so much competition, there are companies that have been there longer than you, more money, more infrastructure, and more resources. But if you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, but also the most successful professionals, whether it's doctors, lawyers, scientists, engineers, teachers, nurses, the common factor is determination to work hard, to sacrifice, and to pursue the fulfillment of their dreams.
If you really have a lot of naysayers who are whispering in your life, it probably means that there are some loopholes in terms of your reputation. And this advice is specifically very important in this case. Remember, build your reputation and everything else would be watertight.
The second advice is you have to build a reputation. So don't count on the fact that you're coming from good parents that really had brought you here today. And I love the minute you greeted your parents, because we don't all know what they have to suffer and how much they do for you until you become a parent yourself. So acknowledge that, and acknowledge that you need to produce. So you need to create your own reputation. Like if you work in an establishment, people should look at you and say, this is the guy that comes first in the morning and leaves last at night. This is the guy, the most hardworking guy. This is the most accomplishing guy. So to do that, you need to feel that you're not working for someone, but you're working for yourself, and you need to promote. And by giving to the place you work in, you actually help yourself.
In addition to your intact reputation, make sure you have a vision and you stick to it.
The experience we've had in Rwanda is that even from our own history of starting 18 years ago with almost nothing, today we're the 9th fastest growing economy forecast for this year. We're the 3rd easiest place to do business in Africa. We're the 3rd most competitive country in Africa. And the reason that has been achieved is really because Rwanda has had a vision, Rwanda has stuck to it, Rwanda has focused on it, and Rwanda has claimed its place among other countries in the world. Now, many countries, including Rwanda, will always face interest from other external factors. If you don't stay focused and you don't really stay the course that you've put for yourself, then you can be diverted. And that's how many countries actually lose out on their vision. And I think our experience in Rwanda is really stay focused on your vision and claim your place in the world. And you will eventually be able to achieve what you aim to.
I will say this. A lot of people will say, well, they don't agree with this advice because that's what rich people will always say. But I think, you know what? There's some sense to it. Pursue your passion and money will follow.
having money does not equate to happiness. Money is important. I mean, all of us want a decent, a good standard of living, and we want to send our children to good schools. So money is important. But what is significantly more important is pursue your dreams, pursue those interests that you have, do the things that makes you happy and that excites you and that motivates you. Whether you want to be a nurse, and my mother was a nurse, my father was a teacher before he went into business. So every objective, every wish, every dream that every young South African has, focus on those and work hard. With hard work and sacrifice, you can not just realize your dreams, but you will be extremely successful. And for those to whom money is important, through hard work and sacrifice, you will succeed more than Patrice and various others have in the world. Just work hard, sacrifice, and persevere. You will succeed. You will do well.
Once you start accumulating that money, of course, remember, give back to the society where the money comes from.
Nobody can succeed if the society around you is failing. If you are lucky and made some money, it is thanks for all these people around you, for all the society. You owe something to that society, and you need to get involved and do something. And please try to think carefully what you're trying to do, trying to measure the impact of what you're doing. And finally, maybe you want to think about your legacy. After you die, what you want people to say about you. I think probably the kind of conversation I have with any philanthropist.
Today, we're actually investing $2.3 billion between sugar, $2 billion, and rice, about $300 million. And this all to do with government policies, because the policy of the government is that we want to see that in the next 5 years, Nigeria produce all what they need. And we want to replicate that. In West Africa alone, the import of sugar is 4.5 million tons, but rice is worse, it's 13.2 million tons in just West Africa. And we can grow rice almost anywhere. So what we are also trying to do, you talk about this financial inclusion. Yes, of course, when we incubate companies, we now go ahead and list them and make sure that the people domestically are involved, whether the companies are in South Africa, and we are going to list in South Africa. So at least the downtrodden will also be part of the process, and also they will enjoy. In agriculture alone, we are going to create almost 180,000 jobs in the next 4 years. So it's part of what we are giving back to the society.
If you really are undecided about what part you can play in helping others, Precious Moloi Matsepe says you can never go wrong with education. Education is really one of the things that you can help give others to allow them to break their barriers and to allow them to advance economically and socially.
The biggest thing we can do to advance, the girl, children, and women is education. It is we can't state this enough. It is important. As Madiba said, it is the key that opens many doors, and it does. You and I sit here because we benefited from good quality education. So for me, education is important, and that is why the Motsepe Foundation focuses on taking young boys and girls to university to study in the STEM fields. We've committed more than 2,000 bursaries to date for students to study in STEM fields. And I consciously make sure that 50% of those are girls.
Yeah.
Currently, we're running at about 42%, but we're driving ourselves to ensure that 50% and above are girls. Why is this important? I think for young girls and women, if they are to advance, particularly in the workplace, we need to be looking at sectors where they can excel. For me, the science and technology sectors are the sectors that have been shown in business to be growing. So these are sectors that will offer secure employment for young
for our youth, of course, but particularly for young women, because technology doesn't. You don't need any muscle power. Now all of a sudden it's about your brain, your creativity. That's what you bring to the workplace.
Now this one goes to Africans in the diaspora. It comes from Naguib Sawiris, who says Africans in the diaspora should consider coming back and developing home. Now, this is my 2025 rabbit hole for my first few weeks that I've been in this year, going through and trying to figure out what advice has been given in the past. If there is something that spoke to you, leave it in the comments below and we can discuss. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.